All right, it says I'm live. I must be live. What's up, party people? We got 3 days left in 2021. It's time to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to go start this new year on a good foot. I think we all want to do that. So I decided that before I would, Roadcaster's a little too far away from me. I got to lean over a little bit here. All right, so I decided that I was going to do a random last-minute training. I was getting ready to leave the studio here, and I thought, you know what? I've been hanging out in the new Clubhouse app. All the kids are talking about. I'm not sure if you've heard about it or not. It's all audio, so it's a chat room. People set up specific chat rooms, and people join those chat rooms, and you can only communicate via voice, so audio. So there's a moderator, there's a few co-moderators. So there's a lot of free, awesome, amazing content happening, specifically in my world of marketers, entrepreneurs, etc. And I've been dabbling in that for the past couple of days. So it'll be exciting to see where it goes. I'm a little jaded by new apps and excitement, especially when it's not a large, giant player, because 5 years ago, I utilized a platform called Blab. Blab allowed you to have 4 video windows and you can add people with a chat room below. It was brilliant. And they would send you the replay. And that's when I started to repurpose content, because I would go live on Blab. I would get the audio and video, turn the audio into a podcast. The video I would put on YouTube and chop it up into micro content. So Blab was amazing. Then it went belly up. And when it went belly up, I kind of just said, to heck with this whole podcast thing again. And I canceled the show for what would be the second time before I actually relaunched it and stuck with it for Beyond the Story podcast. So I decided today, I did a training last week for a group out of Austin, Texas. And I did the title of the training was How to Start a Podcast. So I thought I put together a slide deck, and I was glad that I did, because I knew that I would later utilize that slide deck. And I was on Clubhouse a couple of days ago. I think it was Sunday, in with a bunch of marketers and fellow keynote speakers. And one of them said, I built my buddy Brian Fanzo. In fact, if you don't follow iSocial fans across the board, the guy's brilliant, a brilliant speaker, a brilliant mind, a brilliant mark. And he has built a 6-figure business just creating content. So by going live every single day, he's been able to turn those Facebook Lives into actual business, into something that actually turns into a new speaking opportunity, a new brand deal, etc. So for those of you tuning in here, thanks so much for tuning in. I see people coming in from YouTube, coming in from, let's see here. We got Facebook. Marley Q's in the house. What's up, girl? Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Congrats on your hubby's Emmys and just crushing life. You guys are amazing. And we got Juan C over on YouTube. Juan, can I make a tutorial on how to make a podcast using Anchor Mobile? Yes, I have done one on how to create an intro on YouTube, on Anchor, but I haven't done one on how to actually create a podcast on Anchor. I am taking that request right now. I'm writing that down, Juan. Stay tuned for that. Newest one that'll be dropping on the channel this week, right before the beginning of the first of the year, is how to create a podcast intro using a software called Audacity. So if you don't have a Mac and you're not familiar with GarageBand, but you're eager to learn how to create an intro for your podcast, intro and outro, I've created a video on how to create one with Audacity. Audacity is a free software to use. You can go to audacityteam.org and download Audacity for your machine. That allows you to record voiceovers, go find some royalty-free music, put it under that voiceover, or over that voiceover rather, and over that voiceover, and create an intro. So that's this week's video. I am going to do create podcast in Anchor. That's coming up, Juan. So thanks for that idea. Hey, listen, that's how all of the content on my channel, whoa, I was shaking my desk because I'm writing. That's how all the content on my channel becomes a reality, is based on analytics, what I'm asked about the most, and what are the most popular things around my topic, which is podcasting, how to start a podcast. So if you haven't done so already, I'll put a link down below in the comments. It's youtube.com/podcast launch lab. It's an entire library and really a labor of love, like every other piece of content that's created to help everyone better understand what they don't know about starting a podcast. I've gone all in with YouTube, thanks to my good friend and my brother, Mr. Owen Video. He helps people win on YouTube. I help people win with a podcast. So we have a great, great relationship with that. I just put my comment on YouTube, but that's all good. If someone could type the comment. I'll type it in here on Facebook. Where are we at here? I don't want to start playing. What's up, Jeffrey Aristo? Your last name, I've struggled with that for 25 years. Iristorza. I'm an MC. I should know how to say names. Jeffrey, what's up, dude? Great to see you. Great to see you on your quads, guys. We got the dad on roller skates here, ladies and gentlemen, on Instagram. I love it, dude. Love it. So the link is in the comments on Facebook and on YouTube. It's youtube.com well, if you're watching it on YouTube, you don't need the link, but youtube.com/podcast Launch Lab. Make sure you subscribe to it. Make sure that you go through the library. Every time someone comes to me with questions about starting a podcast, I send them right to the channel, which is extremely handy to do. In addition to that, my last bit of self-promotion would be to make sure that you grabbed a copy of my book. Wait, where's my point? How's it right here? It's the opposite for me here. Grab a copy of my book right there. We go. Right here. You can grab a copy on Amazon.com. All you simply need to do is go to Amazon, type in, this sounds elementary. People have asked me, how do I find the book? Type in Podcasts Suck. And boom, there you go. You can get it for $0 if you have Kindle Unlimited, or it's $14.99 if you want an actual physical print copy. And it'll get to you just after the first of the year. All right, let me get on to thanks, Jeffrey. I appreciate you, man. Thanks for tuning in. All right, let's get to sharing the screen here. This training is going to last about as long as it's going to last. I wouldn't say it'd be more than 30 or 40. So make sure that you're taking notes. Obviously, you can replay this. For those of you maybe watching this, no idea even who I am, which is totally cool. It's great to connect with you. I help marketers and entrepreneurs go from idea to iTunes in 90 days or less by starting a podcast. So we have a full proven system that's done for you and done with you to get you to the finish line on actually starting your podcast. There's a lot involved. I'm going to unpack what's involved with starting a podcast. You're going to see that right now. And that may actually urge you to say, hey, listen, maybe there is a lot more work involved than what I thought. Now, don't get me wrong. Disclosure, you can start a podcast with everything I teach you in this training today. But sometimes I've found that we need accountability. We need some encouragement, some empowerment. I know these don't seem like, things that would be factored in, but in the content game, when it comes to representing your brand and content, they're absolutely vital. I wrote an entire chapter about giving people permission to actually start a podcast. I don't know your background or where you came from, but somewhere along the line, somebody probably told you couldn't do something. And that trickled over into business and content and how you show up in business and in life. So to reconfirm that, yes, you can. We're going to talk a little bit about that in the training. Let me get my slides queued up here real quick. And I don't think I'm going to be able to see you, but I'm going to get a monitor going here on my phone so that I can actually see what's going on. Probably put that right here. Let's see here. Okay. That way I got a little monitor going. I don't know that you can see me. You can see. Okay. So you can see the slides. I don't know that you can, and I think I'm over to the right somewhere or to the left of your screen, wherever it may be. There we go. Okay. It's a little bit of a delay on my monitor. All right, there it is. Good old StreamYard, doing it proper. All right, for those of you watching the replay, thanks so much for tuning in. Maybe you're watching this in the middle of the night on Facebook or on YouTube or on LinkedIn. I'm really glad that you're here. My name is Sebastian Rusk. I write books and I speak on the topic of digital storytelling, specifically with podcasting. And I've got an agency in studio here in Miami called the Podcast Launch Lab that helps marketers and entrepreneurs go from idea to iTunes in 90 days or less by starting a podcast. So I'm going to walk you through that process on what it takes. This is a general overview. There's some nooks and crannies that do need to be done with the podcast process, but I at least want to help you better understand exactly what creating a podcast is all about, how it's done, how does a show get into iTunes and Spotify and all that fun stuff, why you would want to start a podcast, how you host it, how you market it, what's involved, interviewing, etc. And we're going to dive into all of that. All right. So I can't see the comments coming up, but I'm sure they are coming in, and I do thank you for chiming in. I will respond back to each and every one of you lovely people post training. All right, here we go. So title of the training, how to start a podcast. I think that's pretty relevant name there. But why, Sebastian? Why do I want to start a podcast? Well, the thing about figuring out why you want to start a podcast is that answer is entirely up to you. Now, it's also extremely imperative that you get clear on what this why is, because this why is going to be your driving force to actually starting the podcast. Why did I start a podcast? So I started a podcast because by trade, I'm a storyteller. I like to tell other people's stories, and I do that through the means of a podcast. I just happen to have a friend challenge me with a question about 5 years ago that said, "Hey, why don't you create something that helps people start a podcast?" And I took that advice, and I was in this building actually, and on the 5th floor at on a shared desk, and I took out 3 sheets of paper and I just started writing and mapping out my entire process of me starting a podcast back in 2011 and stopping it and starting it and stopping it, but still documenting that whole process, choosing the name, figuring out how to host it, figuring out a schedule, who am I going to talk to, interviews, what strategy was involved with that. So 5 years ago, I created the Podcast Launch Lab. I spent the next 3.5 years figuring out who my ideal client was, and if there was and also justifying whether or not there was an actual market for people that wanted to start a podcast. I quickly realized that there was, and this stuff was not slowing down. Not only was it not slowing down, but it was quickly replacing radio, especially with the onset of audio in general. We're living in this audio era where we can order shampoo while still in the shower by saying, "Hey, Alexa, order more Pert Plus." And that there's never been a time like that available where we can literally speak things into existence. So we look at where it's going with AI and voice in general, in addition to podcasting continuing to grow and expand. I know it seems like there's a lot of podcasts out there, but there's only just over 1 million. I know that sounds like a big number, but there's 15 million YouTube creators if we're using that in comparison. So 15 million YouTube channels versus 1 million podcasters. And I want to nip this real quick for everybody, because I get asked this question a lot. Do you think there's too many podcasts already? My short and long answer to that is absolutely not. Just for the simple fact that no one is you. No one is you. No one is your community. No one is your ideas. No one is your style. No one is what you're doing, unless, of course, you're replicating what someone else is doing, which you probably shouldn't be doing anyway. But no, podcasting is not saturated. Yes, there is a gigantic market for it. If you haven't seen the moves that Spotify's been making over the past 36 months to be able to purchase existing podcast platforms that had shows and advertising within the platform, like Gimlet Media got purchased for, I don't know, 200 million. The Joe Rogan deal for 100 million. Joe Rogan left YouTube, iTunes, every other listening platform, went exclusive with Spotify. These moves are being made for a significant reason, because podcasting isn't going anywhere. But you must get clear about what your why is. Your why must be, I want to leave the world in a different way than I found it. I want to have conversations with people that impact not only myself, but them and the people that are consuming this content. I want to tell my story on how I was able to go from where I was to where I actually am now, how I was able to heal, how I was able to overcome specific things. And I want to share that story because that's going to help other people do the same thing. And of course, that's the hope. So you must get clear on your why. People call me about starting a podcast. They say, I want to start a podcast. My number one question to them is why. And if they can't give me a clear why, a passionate why, a why that actually makes sense, then I have them go back to the drawing board and call me back, because they're not ready to start a podcast yet. You have to get clear about your why, but only you can do that. Well, that's great and everything, but how do I do that? We're going to talk about that in just a second. I want to reconfirm what I just got done saying before the training started. And that's, yes, you can. You can call this woo-woo. You can call this, whatever you want. Motivational, very Tony Robbins of you. And that's a compliment, by the way. But yes, you can. Somewhere along the line, someone told you that you couldn't. Maybe when you were a kid, maybe when you were growing up, maybe in a job you had. Who knows? There's a lot of jerks out there. But there's somewhere along the line, someone may have told you that you can't. I'm here today to tell you, yes, you can. Yes, you can start a podcast. Yes, you can create that personal brand. Yes, you can quit that job and actually pursue what's been heavy on your heart and mind of pursuing. So just know you have permission to do it. You don't need anybody to give you permission to. And in the event that you did, I'm doing that right now for you. All right. So why should I start a podcast? Well, you want to tell a story. You want to serve others and your community. You want to build new relationships. That's such a major key, building new relationships. I could go on and on and on and on and on about the amazing things that have happened based on the people that I've been able to interview over the past 10 years. It gives you a platform to serve and connect with people. And most important, you might not even thought about this, but starting a podcast enables your company or your brand to become a media company. So if you think about that for a second, whoa, wait a second, a media company. Yeah. If I called you 15 years ago and offered you a spot on a local radio station in prime time, and you had a chiropractic firm, a law firm, whatever it might be, you would not think twice about whether or not you were going to take this opportunity. You would absolutely say yes, take the opportunity, and then figure it out as you went. Why? Well, because radio, right? That's where the earballs are at. Well, the earballs, meaning eyeballs and ears, are now in the Facebook timeline, in the Instagram timeline, on YouTube. I no longer use Comcast. Thank God. Praise God. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus. Comcast is out of my life forever. Why? Because I cut the cord and I use YouTube TV. That's right. $69 a month. I control it from my phone. I can watch it on my phone, tablet, my house, whatever TV I want in my house. There's only one, but if I had another one, well, there's actually two. But this is the world we're living in. We're able to cut the cord, fire the cable company, and watch TV on the internet. That's the world that we're living in. The only question is your brand in that world? Because I can pull my podcast up or any podcast up on Apple TV and listen to a podcast just like I'm watching a TV show. You're cooking, cleaning, hanging out, whatever you're doing, just like you're listening to music, listen to a podcast. I actually recently just discovered that because I was like, duh, Apple TV. It's got mainly all the apps that come on your phone come on Apple TV. So anything that can play on Apple, there's also games too. I haven't quite figured that out yet. But in any event, becoming a media company as a brand, you maintain all the control, every single piece of control. You create the content, you post the content, you share the content, you decide who you're going to interview, what you're going to talk about. When you monetize the show, you decide how that's going to be done, advertisers, sponsors, etc. That's entirely up to you when that happens. There's no waiting for some radio network executive to say when you can't have a show or what you can and can't talk about. A lot of red tape with traditional media. Still around. Who knows how long? So Sebastian, I understand the whole why thing. Like you need to figure out your why. That's not the easiest thing for me to do. Figuring out my why. How do I do that? Again, here's some more woo-woo Tony Robbins motivational stuff for you that actually works. So I wrote a whole chapter on finding your why in my book. And I wrote down this little exercise that I run myself through when I'm trying to figure out why I do or don't want to move forward with a concept or an idea. I asked myself a couple questions. The first one, if I had my dream business, I would be doing fill in the blank. I feel most fulfilled when I do fill in the blank. My deepest desire is to. So if you can get clear on this, it's going to help you better understand what you should be doing with your brand or what you could be doing and you're not doing. It's going to help you get clear on your why. And I'm telling you right now, as a prime example of doing work that actually matters and that actually fulfills me, I'm doing this now. It hasn't always been that way. It took about 10 years to finally, before it was just exchanging time for money. Even though I didn't have a job, it was time for money, agency work. You pay me, I provide this content. And I think there's got to be more here. And when I decided to make a conscious decision to go all in with podcasting and podcasting only, that's the only piece of content that we offer as an agency. Content, brand strategy, development, and content. There's no, I'll manage your Facebook page, we'll create this, and I did away with it all. I fired 8 clients beginning of last year. Why? Because I hated the work. Sebastian, just creating content, playing around on Facebook all day. This something might be fun. To me, I know there's more. And the more is I want to do work that matters. And I want to leave people different. So being able to figure this out, run yourself through this exercise real quick. It really does help that process. All right. Here's what it takes to start a podcast. So the initial stuff, you need a name. You need an idea and a concept. And most important, You need some commitment. You've got to commit to being able to not only launch the show, but stick to it. The average show, statistics would tell us, doesn't make it past 6 episodes before going to the podcast graveyard. Don't be part of those statistics. Figure out a plan that's realistic, that's going to work for you. Creating a name, it's something catchy that complements your brand. Don't include the word podcast, and don't put headphones or a microphone on your podcast cover art. Stay away from that. Create something that's an extension of your brand. My show's called Beyond the Story. Why? Because I like to go beyond the story and tell people stories above and beyond what their storyline is, on what they, their brand represents, and have a casual conversation around that story. Idea and concept. What am I going to talk about, and who am I going to talk to, and what interviews am I going to conduct, and what kind of conversations am I going to have to create value for my audience that's going to resonate with people? And then also the stuff that I'm talking about, can I take some of that content and repurpose it into content to market the podcast episodes? And then, of course, your commitment. Like anything else, your level of commitment is going to be a direct reflection of the results that you're getting. The end. Name, catchy, relatable, complements your brand. We talked about that just now. But remember, doesn't have to be. Listen, if I had the Podcast Launch Lab show, it would be okay, I guess. Or the Podcast Launch Lab podcast. That's weird. To me, it's just weird. Doesn't resonate. My old podcast name, it started off Social Buzz on Air, and then it went to the Seb Rush Show because I had this big old ego trip that I thought the Seb Rush, like everyone knows who Sebastian Rusk is, let alone Seb Rusk, which is obviously short for Sebastian. And then after a while, I was sick and tired of people saying, what's the name of your podcast? And I said, the Seb Rush Show. And they're like, who the is Seb? I'm like, well, it's me. So I changed it for the third and final time, at least for now. I'm not going to change the name again. I'll launch another show before I do that, but I like to be on the story. It fits, it jives. I like it. I get excited about it, and other people get excited about it, which is most important. Equipment. Sebastian, what microphone do I need? I mean, I want to start a podcast, but equipment and this and studio and this and that. You don't need anything to start a podcast as far as equipment is concerned, as long as you have an iPhone 6. Android users, you're on your own. I don't know what recording capability is available on Androids. I'm sure there's something comparable, but my point is you only need a smartphone to record a podcast. Because if you started a podcast today on Anchor.fm, which is a free platform, by the way. Take a sip of water. Sorry about that. If you started a podcast today on Anchor.fm, which is a free platform owned by Spotify, they allow you to create a podcast, record a podcast, produce a podcast, post a podcast, monetize a podcast, all the above, all within their platform for free. You can use the app on your phone, or you can utilize the desktop version where you can use a USB mic. If you wanted to start a podcast today and you have all the ideas and you want everything to line up, and I need everything all in one place, and I want to do it myself because I'm a control freak, then Anchor.fm will allow you to do that today. Okay? You don't need equipment. You don't. But I wrote it again. Another big topic in the book was equipment, and I called it my crawl, walk, run concept with equipment. Crawl, just getting started. Let's make sure my level of commitment is where I think it's at. Number one. Number two, let me make sure I have a viable idea. And number three, let me make sure that I can actually commit to it. Like, let's not spend $1. Let's make sure I can actually commit to it. And I'll use my phone. If I commit to it and I do 10 episodes, well, I'm on to something. I've committed to it. We can go to the walk option. The walk option is a USB mic. USB mic plugs right into any computer, right through your USB outlet. And most settings, sometimes you got to go into the audio settings and make sure the computer recognizes it. But most of them are plug and play. You'll more than likely, you plugged a Blue Yeti or a Blue Snowball into your computer and you opened up Zoom and you chose your mics, Blue Yeti or Blue Snowball would probably be right there. These are fantastic mics, as long as you are up close to them, okay? I'm talking about this far away from the mic. Lots of people like to have this Blue Yeti and just set it on their desk, and they're sitting 4 feet away from the microphone. Well, I got a mic. Can't hear me? Yeah, it sounds like you're in a very, very noisy closet with a mic across the room. Make sure that mic's up. That Blue Yeti you can flip upside down and put it up on one of these scissor mic stands, as well as the Blue Yeti. You can take that bottom stand off and just take the ball part of the mic and put it on the stand and have the mic right close to you and have incredibly quality sound. I podcast with USB mics for years before I actually upped my game. Now, the reason I upped my game is that I went on a cruise a couple years ago, met a guy, financial advisor in Nashville, who had just started his podcast, was a former sound engineer. and he would not back down on me upgrading my podcast equipment to what you're seeing right here. Now, the reason he did that was because I was going from a USB mic to actually condenser mic with a receiver. So what you're looking at right here with the red box is a Scarlett Studio. It's called the Focusrite Scarlett Studio. That red box plugs directly into your computer via USB. The XLR cable goes from the mic into this box, and your headphones go into it too. And there's like 3 knobs to use: main volume, headphone volume, and I think your mids and highs. And you can monitor yourself too, which means when you're talking in the mic, you can hear. This entire setup right here will run you between $150 and $225, depending on what you get. You can buy this whole bundle. I think it's like $225. A little cheaper if you only get one mic outlet, but if you're looking to grow and you think maybe you might need an extra mic, one of these days you might as well spend the extra $50 and get the 2 mics in. This whole setup right here run you about $225, $250. If you've already got a mic, you can just get the receiver. You really don't even need headphones either. You can use any headphones available. Some people just like to, have headphones. I don't prefer these over the ear things. They hurt your ears after a while. These don't, because they're Audio Technica, but this cord right here makes me crazy. Anyway, this is the walk option. Crawl, USB mic, walk, the Focusrite Scarlett Studio. There's several different types. You can buy USB boxes with mics that go into it, but these guys are the industry leaders. I have one of these. I fully endorse them. I highly recommend it to the students that go through our program, and they have a lot of success with them. And then running on the equipment side, you're like, maybe you're Daddy Warbucks and you are Mommy Warbucks, and you're like, hey, well, I want to start and I want to do it right out of the gate. I want to get the right stuff and never have to upgrade again, or, at least, I've got what I need, the best of the best. You're one of those, I want the best of the best right out of the gate. Not a problem. So that's the setup that we have here in the Podcast Launch Lab, which you're looking at right here. That is a Rodecaster Pro made by a company called Rode. That is a Rode pod mic. And then that's obviously a mic cord, mic stand, and then Audio Technica. I think they're MX20s or MX60 headphones. This entire setup will run you between $700 and $800. Rodecaster is $599. The pod mic is $99. The headphones are about $60. The mic stand's $15, and the mic cord comes with a mic. And if not, they're about $10. But this is your crawl, walk, run option as far as equipment is concerned. But let me go back to my original point. You can do this with an iPhone. So don't put off what you want to do, what you should be doing, what you can be doing today with starting a podcast, just because you don't have the equipment yet, or you can figure it out. We want something bad enough, we figure out a way. We'll walk through fire in order to figure stuff out when we really, really want it. So don't trip on it, but figure out which option works the best for you on here. There's also podcast recommendations on the Podcast Launch Lab website. Just go to podcastlaunchlab.com under equipment recommendations. Podcast hosting. So how in the world, so you've created your show, you've got your equipment locked down. Well, how do I get my show into iTunes after I've recorded an episode? Well, you're going to need to sign up for podcast hosting. If you use Anchor, that is your podcast host. So you don't need podcast hosting. So you create your show, they host it, they do the whole 9. It doesn't cost you $1. Podcast hosting goes anywhere from $0 to $25 a month, depending on what you need. The main players out there are Libsyn, Buzzsprout, Simplecast, Podbean, in my opinion. I'm not a user of any of those platforms except for Simplecast. I like Simplecast a lot because they do all the things that I've listed here. They help me with distribution, which means my show gets into iTunes, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and the other 15 platforms that you're seeing the icons for here on the screen. They also give me a podcast website. So all I have to do is register beyondthestorypodcast.com and point that domain to the podcast website. You do not need to build a podcast website. That's another thing that's been continuing to come up in conversation, and it can. I'm puzzled as to why the extra work would even be done. So wait a second, as if there wasn't enough work to be done with creating a podcast episode and getting it uploaded, you then want to go create a blog post and embed the player and put the podcast episode on your website. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could, but you can also register the domain name. When people say, hey, listen, how do I find your podcast? I go to beyondthestorypodcast.com. When they click subscribe, they see all these icons pop up. You can go subscribe wherever you want. I'm not going to send you to iTunes if you're an Android user or you use Spotify. So this allows you to meet people exactly where they're at. So podcast hosting does a couple things. Allows you to upload your podcast episodes, so that's where they live. It allows you to set up distribution so that every time you upload a new episode, it's distributed to all of these listening platforms that you're seeing on the screen right here. It gives me a podcast website, which is centralized location. It's very simple. It has the homepage, the episode page, and the about page, which, by the way, goes to my LinkedIn profile. And I make it very easy to subscribe. It's frictionless. Because if you're an Android user and I send you to subscribe on Apple, it's just not going to work. So send people to your podcast website. Stop trying to build a podcast website. And I hear that so much. That's the biggest bullshit line of crap that I hear from people with starting a podcast. Well, my website's not done yet. Since when has a website even mattered? Credibility, sure. Lead capture, sure. But chances are you're not doing a huge lead gen campaign out of the gates. So who cares about your stupid website? Focus on what's important and what can actually be done. That's the biggest delay ever. That website. I can't get started with social. I can't create content. Listen, one thing does not have to be done before the other thing gets started. Okay. I want to be really, really clear about that because I hear that constantly. And it really does grind my gears because you don't need a stupid website to start a podcast. Okay, just stop. I'm almost done with the website. Okay, keep going. Listen, no one cares about the website. They care about what valuable content you're creating and how you're able to serve them. That's it. That's the only thing they care about. So don't get wrapped up on creating a podcast website. Forget it. It's extra work. Can it be done? Yes. Can it be an extension of your personal brand? You have a podcast tab on your personal brand website? Yes. Can you create blog posts out of each episode and repurpose that content and put a little mini player to play that episode on your actual website? Yes. I mean, heck, if you had WordPress or some plugins, you can actually upload audio right into a blog post and embed it. And technically your podcast lives on your website. I mean, if you're that much of a control freak, that option's available. But stop getting caught up on that stupid website. My goodness, it's 2021. Websites haven't been cool for 10 years. Interviews. I get asked a lot about this. Sebastian, how do I conduct an interview? And it comes natural to me. So at first I was like, what do you mean? But then I realized that it doesn't come natural to everyone. So there's a couple things I want to point out about the interview. Number one, you want to be strategic about the interviews that you're choosing because the people you're having conversations with, you want to build a relationship with, either a strategic relationship with, or you're trying to figure out how to do business with them. I've done that for the past 10 years. Any big name I've been trying to get in front of. That's how I became friends with Gary Vee 11 years ago. Got him on the show, sat down, interviewed him when he was here in Miami. We stayed in touch, and now I run into him in cities that we're in, and I'm the MC for the event, and he's a keynote speaker. And yeah, all started because I asked him to be on my podcast and asked him to interview him for his second book 11 years ago. So be strategic about these interviews. I'll never forget getting called by a sales training organization a few years ago. And sadly enough, they never launched their podcast. They just thought about the great idea. And if you're watching this right now, I'm making fun of you. You know who you are. They called me and they said, hey, listen, so I've got a sales training organization. I'd like to create a podcast because I want to interview CEOs of large brands here in Miami. And I want to ask them about their biggest sales struggles. And I want to actually nip everything right there on the interview and help them actually resolve these sales issues. And after I'm done with the interview, hopefully it went well and I'll be able to get a meeting from them where I'll be able to actually go in. They'll be able to retain me. I'll be able to train their organization. My mind was like, oh, that is genius. They never did anything with it. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. They got all the answers. They're doing it their way. You had no podcast, but I'm extremely excited that I was gifted with that idea because that's the most incredible strategic deal you can do that's the best way to monetize your podcast out of the gates is by making sure you're aligning yourself with strategic people that you can interview, that you could potentially do business with. You know how many podcasts that I've sold people because I've had them on my show and they have a big brand and a platform, but they don't have a podcast? I'm able to develop a relationship with them, build rapport and credibility with them. And then when I ask them if they have a podcast, they go, no, but I should totally hire you. They do it. That's how Shay Robottom and I became incredible friends. But more important, I had her in the studio back in January because she's a local here in Miami. Look who's in your backyard. That's always a great thing. I mean, I'm in a big city, so I'm fortunate. But that's how I met Shay. She was the first interview in the old podcast Launch Lab studio, and then called me 3 months later. Sebastian, I got an idea to start my podcast. I want to tell my childhood traumatic story on how I healed from it and help other people do the same thing. So I want to hire you to do it because you're the guy. So she hired me, and we haven't stopped since. We continue to produce and promote the Shay Robottom show, where she had like 7,000 downloads the first day. She has a huge platform. She's got 500,000 followers on LinkedIn and a giant following based on what she's built on LinkedIn and LinkedIn marketing. And she decided to hedge her bets and say, let's launch a podcast and get some more content out on top of what I'm already doing. So Shout out to my homegirl, Shay Robottom. Keep doing what you are doing, girl, because you are crushing it. Make sure that the topic that the stuff that you're talking about in your podcast actually creates value for the people listening. It's very important. And then lastly, Larry King talked about this one time, and I never forgot about it. Larry King, one of the most legendary interviewers of our time, said that there's an 80-20 rule with interviewing people, and that is that your guest is talking 80% of the time, you're talking 20% of the time. Okay, that's hard for a lot of you because a lot of you like to nod your head, say, yep, jump into people's conversation. Oh, yeah, you share your experience on top of what they just got done saying instead of just shutting up and letting them do what they're there to do, which is provide value to your audience. Your is to guide the conversation. Your job is to dig deeper into the answers that they're giving by asking things like, wow, that's interesting. Why did you do that? Really? When did that happen? Why did that happen? And to be able to guide the conversation, not for you to talk. It's your job to shut up and ask questions. That's what your job is there to do. I know that was a little frank, but a lot of people out there nodding heads, a lot of uh-huhs, a lot of stupid laughs over people while they're actually talking on your podcast. So you know who you are. I don't know who you are, but I've seen it before. Marketing. So how do I market my podcast? Well, best way to market your podcast is through the guests that you're having on the show, and then being a guest on other podcasts. So other strategic podcasts that you can get on and talk about your brand, your show, because they're always going to ask you, where can people find you? Where can they listen to your show? Where can they connect? And all those call to actions are part of being on somebody else's podcast. You can also create micro content. So I'm going live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube right now. I'm going to take this training and I'm going to chop it up into micro content that I can post on a daily basis that gets people intrigued on it, that will lead to some sort of funnel that gets people to schedule a call and talk about what they've been thinking about pertaining to starting a podcast. So I'm creating my own sales funnel by creating content and then repurposing that content to micro content to continue to feed the sales funnel. When I say sales funnel, I'm looking for people to consume the content, pique their interest and go, this is something that I need. It resonates with me. Let's have a conversation. Sometimes they hire me, sometimes they don't, but at least they got what they were looking for, which is information about what they don't know, that they don't know about starting a podcast. You can run ads on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest. I don't recommend LinkedIn, and create things like this. This would be an audiogram. It has audio on it. It's a 1-minute clip of Shay saying something during the episode with the little squiggly lines with my branding on it. That's called an audiogram. You can see video clips of, like, I'm sure you've seen them where it's the Zoom replay. You're on one side, your guest is on the other, and there's a title of the video with your branding on the bottom. Those work incredibly well, especially on LinkedIn. Your call to action on that is go to beyondthestory.com, or the link to the website on my podcast website. So that URL is on my podcast website where they can listen. They can also subscribe wherever they choose to do that. The 80-20 rule, making sure that the marketing, the content that you're creating is, you're creating content 80% more than you're talking or trying to find an opportunity. 80-20 rule, very relevant in podcasting, specifically with interviews though. And then running ads. So how do I do this, Sebastian? How is this actually done? Well, you can do it yourself. That's one way to do it. Great way to do that is I just wrote a book. I mentioned that earlier. A lot of you may know about that. If you've purchased a copy of this already, thank you so much. I really appreciate your support. Without you, the books wouldn't sell, and it really wouldn't matter. But if you read this book, I guarantee you that you will, and you do what it said, not just read it, but actually do what it says. I guarantee you'll have everything you need in order to start a podcast. So you can grab your copy today at podcast. There's a typo in there. It's plural. Podcastsuck.com on there. I can't believe I didn't fix that typo. Anyway, so you can do it yourself, read the book, or you can hire us. So podcastlaunchlab.com as a 4-month program to take you from idea to iTunes in 90 days or less. We help you create your intro, your outro. Those are the bookends on each episode that invite people to the show and that thank them for listening. We produce your first 7 episodes. You get one-on-one coaching with myself. And done for you, done with you production. So we're handling all the back end stuff. All you're doing is exactly what I tell you to do and actually recording. And we're handling all of the legwork as far as production and making everything sound pretty. And we work together making sure that you have all your podcast hosting set up and distribution, and that you have everything you need to go from idea to iTunes in 90 days or less. So 4-month program. The idea is to get launched in 90 days. We've got a 30-day buffer there. That's why the program is 4 months long. So if you've been thinking about starting a podcast, but you just haven't done it, chances are you're not going to until you actually take some action to do it. I joined Owen Video's YouTube mastermind earlier this year. I would have never gotten my stuff in order and my ducks in a row with YouTube had I not taken his intensive. Once I got to the intensive, I understood what it took to become a YouTuber, and the ball was in my court to continue to create new content. Same applies here with starting a podcast. But like I mentioned before, yes, you can. All right. I don't know how long this has been. I would assume it's probably about 25 or 30 minutes on here, but I wanted to thank you for your time and for um, listening because I'd be talking to myself here. So let's see. I got some comments coming in here. 80-20 for sales. Yes, it 100% is 80-20 for sales reps, specifically sales teams on here. Thanks so much for tuning in here, Jeffrey. If I've missed your comment, I definitely will reply as I see it come in after the broadcast here. If you're watching this later on, you're thinking, man, I'm glad that I ran into this and that I saw this. This training really, really helped me out. I think Sebastian is somebody that can help me get this done. I do need to hire someone that knows what they're talking about, that can hold me accountable and actually get me to the finish line. I'd be more than happy to chat with you about what that looks like. I'll put a link in the comments on Facebook on here to go right to my calendar. For those of you that may have a pen handy, it's podcastlaunchlabnow.com. That brings you right to my calendar. I post that on YouTube there. I'll post it on LinkedIn as well. And that'll allow you to schedule a call, and we'll sit down for 10 or 15 minutes and chat about what's possible, what your idea is. Sometimes it's not always the best idea, and we have to send you back to the drawing board, but I'm confident that you've got it in you to be able to create whatever it is you're looking to create. It's just a matter of working those logistics out to go to get out of your head and onto the mic. I need to coin that because I just made it up. But anyway, I don't know if I'll be going live again before the end of the year. And in the event that I don't, I wanted to just encourage all of you that yes, 2020 has been an absolutely crazy year. It's been full of loss, challenge, uncertainty, and heck, that doesn't mean 2021 doesn't mean that we're completely out of this. But we will be, and we will be eventually. But now is the time, while you're home, while you're in your office, while you're social distancing, while things are a bit slower than they actually would be, is to start taking those ideas that are in your head and getting them out. The first thing to do is just write those ideas down first and start finding out what is realistic for you. No one cares if you create content. No one cares if you get started today, tomorrow, or you never get started. It is your responsibility to make that decision on saying, I'm going to step up. I'm going to lead this year. I'm going to create content. I'm going to share my story. I'm going to build a community. I'm going to get out of my own way, and I'm just going to see what happens. If you're thinking about launching a personal brand, I do that too. I've done that multiple times for multiple people over the course of years, and I continue to do it through the shows that we launch. So if that's something you'd like to chat about, I'd be more than happy to do that too. But if you are looking to start a personal brand and launch a brand, you should be launching that brand or that concept with a podcast. So I'm going to leave you with that. I'm wishing everyone a very, very happy and safe new year. Stay home. Don't go out. That's hard to do for people in Miami, but don't go out. Just stay home. Stay with your family. Embrace what's to come in 2021. It's going to be a great year. I really, really believe that. 2020 has been a great year, even though things have been bananas and nuts. So we're bananas and nuts. So the 2020 just met us there this year. So remember, it's time to get out of your head and into the mic. And only you can do that because no one cares. No one. You know why? Because they're too concerned with caring about themselves. I'm Sebastian Rusk with the Podcast Launch Lab. It's my distinct pleasure to serve each and every one of you. If you're watching this on YouTube, what's up, YouTubers? If you're watching this on LinkedIn, what's up, LinkedIn? And if you're watching this on Facebook, what's up, Facebook? So thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate all of you. Have a safe and happy new year. I'm wishing you all a prosperous 2021. You got questions about starting a podcast, just head over to podcastlaunchlabnow.com and you'll be on my calendar before you know it. All right, friends. Happy New Year. Here we go.